The annual global celebration of the woman is here again, and coincidentally, the first woman and the first African to be appointed as the DG of the World Trade Organization has just resumed office. Interesting, right? There are thousands of things to be known about this woman, and KOKO TV has just taken this bold step of bringing you all of the things that you do not know about the wonderful Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala. Join me as I speak with Onyi-Iweala, the first and eldest child of the Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala family. This is Layo Shobo, and it's a patriarchal world where men are kind of, have more opportunities. So how did mom handle all of this sexism and then racism, being a black African? How did she handle all of this? Are there points where probably she broke down that or saw or something? How did she take all of this?
That's a great question. I feel like my mom learned a lot of lessons from her dad, actually, and she tried to pass those along to me and prepare me for some of the things that I might experience based on her own experiences. But she said, when she was leaving Nigeria to go to the US, to go to Harvard for college, her dad said to her, he was like, look, there's racism in the United States. But what you have to remember, even when you hear these difficult things that are hard to hear and they're hurtful and painful, it's not your problem, it's their problem. And I think that's something that my mom repeated to herself. And that's what helped her get through these difficult situations where people are just acting highly inappropriately or, doing things that just don't make any sense. And you just have to remember it's racism, but the racism is not on you. You just go out there and do the best you can. It's their problem, not your problem. So that's one thing that she repeated, and she also tried to pass on to me as well. But that's not to say that it's not hard, just because you have that saying in the back of your head and just because you know that that's true doesn't mean it isn't painful when you get that sting and you're like, wait, why did that just happen? Or like, why was I passed over? Why am I invisible and they're not listening to what I have to say? So like, for example, I think my mom would, there's sometimes situations where you say something and then no one makes a sound or acknowledges that you said something, and then someone else will say the exact same thing. And then everyone will be like, oh yes, and that's the person that repeated it is a man. And then so my mom has been in those kinds of situations. And so instead of like waiting to contribute in the middle of a meeting, my mom, the way she would deal those types of situations was she would be sure to speak first. She would jump up and she would say, hey, I think X, Y, and Z about, ABC problem, and just put it out there at the very beginning. That way it wouldn't get drowned out in the course of a discussion. And then later on, when other people were saying things, they'd have to say, oh yes, as Ngozi said, it's ABC and X, Y, Z. And I was like, oh, that's a really good strategy. So I think just over the years, she's developed strategies to cope. She actually wrote a book about this kind of stuff, actually in co-authored, with the former Prime Minister from Australia. So I think check that out. That would be a good,
yeah. I surely would do that. So, but about you now, all of this sexism, racism, how did you feel about her? About her. Then recently, a Swiss media, called her a grandma. That's that. I don't. It's not about me here, so it's about you. So, how did you feel about that? How?
Yeah, I think seeing that report and seeing the furor, over that report, it sort of emphasizes the same thing that my mom and her co-author discussed in their book. This idea that whenever we think about women and women in the professional space, instead of first addressing their professional capabilities, we always try to domesticize them. We always try to think about them in the context of their family. And there's nothing wrong, with thinking about a person in the context of their family. It's just that, why don't we do that for men? Why don't we say a grandfather has been appointed as XYZ, And the thing is, men have families too. So I think all they're trying to say is we need to be equitable in how we describe and how we characterize people, because unfortunately, people try to pigeonhole women into only domestic roles or put them in the context of a domestic role. It makes you think that the only role for a woman is within the domestic sphere. But I don't think my mom has she doesn't have wouldn't take offense to being thought of as a grandma. She is a grandma. It's just that in the context of being, leading world organizations and discussing trade and economic things, we should talk about her professional credentials. Like there's a time and place for everything.
So you didn't feel somehow about it? It was just one of those things for you, or how did you take it?
Oh, how did I feel about this? I mean, so for me, within the larger context of how do we talk about women within the professional sphere, I could see why people were upset that she was like grandma. I can see why people are upset, because they're like, why are they talking about that? She's a leading economist. She's a this. She's a that. We should emphasize that because we're talking about a serious job. But then at the same time, I was like, well, I think, my mom wouldn't, she is a grandma, you know what I'm saying? So, and she's proud of that too. So she's proud of that as well. So I didn't feel like, initially, I didn't really feel particularly offended. However, when you put it in the larger context, like of how women are always relegated or associated with the domestic sphere, I see why people were annoyed. I can see why.
Okay, so looking at where we ended that now, so there are different forms of feminism, different people with different ways they practice theirs. So are you a feminist? If yes, if no, what do you think about feminism? And then is mom a feminist too?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm definitely a feminist. I mean, hands down. I'm card carrying, whatever you want to call it. I'm very much a feminist. I know, in some academic circles, many African women scholars also have womanist, because they felt that feminist was really created in the context of a white lens, like a white female lens. And so many Black scholars or Black other female scholars of color felt excluded from feminism because it really focused on whiteness. But the concept, the idea that women should be treated as equals to men, that women are just as capable of contributing to society, not just in the domestic sphere, but in all sorts of spheres like men are, I strongly believe in that. And if that's feminism, then I'm a feminist. And I would say that my mom is the same,
I actually learned a new thing, that womanist and feminist, that people are getting out of feminism because it's white. Wow, it's really not much in Nigeria. We know, all we hear them say and do is feminism, and feminism.
Yeah.
So thank you for giving me that. Okay, so the focus of this magazine is your mom as an inspiration to African girls and African women. But, she had the privilege, she had the opportunity. Dad was a monarch and the family is well-to-do, and then it passed to you and your brothers and, all of the great things that you're doing. And I even saw a cousin recently, she got an award from the UN or something, and I was like, okay, wow, it's really a thing in the Iweala family. So, but how about the less privileged girls and women, people that do not have all of this privilege that your family have?
So I think, first point is that it's very important to see the example of somebody that looks like you doing something great. So, first off, just to have that imagery, I think is really powerful and very important. So that's one point I'll bring up. The second is, you're right. It takes people pushing you up. Sometimes it takes resources in order to train people to get to the points where my mom has gotten. And I think that's why it's really fundamental to her that we need to improve the structures we have, whether it's through government, whether it's through communities, so that people don't have to be the daughter of a monarch or traditional ruler, or don't have to be super wealthy in order to succeed. We want equality of opportunity for everyone. I think that's the bottom line. So from that standpoint, my mom and her siblings were raised that what you need to do, because you have a lot of privilege, take advantage of it as much as possible. Educate yourself, get yourself into the places of power so that you can represent for the people who don't necessarily have the same voice and access that you do. And then when you get there, do something to change the situation so that other people will now also have the opportunity, even if they didn't start out with the same level of opportunity that you yourself are so lucky to have. And that's something that my mom and dad have ingrained in us, it's so important. So I think that's probably why, I believe in this idea of mentorship. And I believe I'm here, I'm trying to represent as a physician scientist who also happens to be a Black woman. And then to try and encourage others and to set up a system, even within my small lab, where other people can see, okay, this is what we need to do so that they can reach those levels. So, I know that even if, I think I'll just put it at that. Number one, the importance of the imagery of having somebody that looks like you in the position. And number two, the importance of having someone who recognizes the importance of equality of opportunity, of giving developing nations of poor, underserved girls the chance to succeed in that place of power so that she can say it over and over again.
Well, that's really amazing. Okay, I forgot to ask this the other time when I asked about feminism. Yeah. I know you're a Christian, you like to sing, yes, the choir and all of those things. But a Nigerian gospeler once said, you cannot be a Christian and be a feminist. Wow, that it contradicts what the Bible says about women submitting, wow, all of those things.
Yeah.
So I'm going to ask you two questions. Yes. Here. So the first is, what do you think about this? This point of view, and then what do you also think about the statement that when women get into power, they begin to I don't want to say misuse or act somehow towards their husbands, wanting to lord over their husbands. And also, what do you think about this? First, about you cannot be a Christian and be a feminist, and then about women in power, lording over their husbands.
Wow. I mean, I guess I am in complete disagreement with this statement that you can't be a Christian and a feminist. The Bible, so the Bible is a living document. The Bible is something that is supposed to guide us. We're supposed to look into the scriptures to understand how we can approach and listen and be with God. And I don't think God wants any of God's creations to be thought of as second-class citizens who should not succeed, who should be abused, or who shouldn't be listened to. I just don't think, for me, God and Jesus Christ, that's not what they're for. Jesus had women as part of his integral group of people that were with him, So I disagree with that statement. And then secondly, I guess I also just disagree with the statement that women in power are automatically going to turn around and lord it over their husbands. I just haven't seen that example. I'm not saying that maybe it happens, I'm sure that you can find one example or something, but I just haven't seen that. Sadly, there are not as many female leaders in high positions of power as we would like. But for the ones that I can see, they actually seem to have incredibly healthy, loving relationships that are truly partnerships with their husbands. Those are the ones that succeed, not the ones that are lording it over or whatever. I feel like that's a problem fundamental to the relationship, and it's independent of whether the woman is in a position of power or not.
Okay.
Excellent. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I hope you have a very good day.
You too.
Oh my God! I just finished speaking with Dr. Onyi-Iweala, and my God, it's really, really, really an amazing session. I had fun all through, and she assured that she had fun as you just watched. Stay tuned to KOKO TV as we bring you many more of these exclusives. I am Layo Shobo. Thank you for joining, and bye for now.